Hello everyone, and thank you so much for attending this evening. I'm really looking forward to being able to give you an update about what's been happening here, both in terms of life and work, and also to having a discussion afterwards, because it's always great to get your questions and to hear what you have to say as well. So I think you probably do all know, but just in case you don't, a reminder that the work I do here is sponsored by different denominations. So as well as the Church of Scotland, we are in partnership with the Methodist Church in Britain, with global ministries from the United States, and of course the Federation of Protestant Churches in Italy, which is a body of churches which has established the Mediterranean Hope Project. So over to what's been happening here over the last few months. Well, unsurprisingly, it's been pretty much dominated by COVID, as it has for you guys as well. And I thought it would be helpful for you just to be able to compare and contrast what's been happening here with what's been happening in the UK. Italy's population is about 90% of the UK's population. So bearing that in mind, you can see that we've had a broadly similar experience, sadly, in terms of the number of cases overall and deaths suffered. Where things have started to change now, of course, is in terms of active cases, because in the UK, case numbers have dropped radically, and although they are dropping here, they're still significantly higher than is the case in the UK. The good news is that they are dropping significantly here. And so within the last week, the daily figures have ranged from 5,000 to 10,000, which for this point in the week is not bad at all. And of course, the main reason, I think, for the change has been to do with the vaccine rollout, which has been somewhat slower than it has been in the UK. However, it is gathering pace, and what you can see is that we are now up to about 21 million doses administered, many of which are a second dose, because there is a bit of a focus here on getting the second doses into people a bit faster than is the case in the UK. We are told that by mid-June we'll be vaccinating 15-year-olds. I'm a bit sceptical about whether Italy will go that fast. However, it's certainly true that the pace has picked up since an army general was put in charge of the vaccine rollout. So fingers crossed, we'll all be in better shape within the next couple of months at least. So spring has sprung here, and we are in the happy position that because things are improving, Italy is opening up, at least to its own residents. And you can see from the map on the top right-hand corner that a lot of Italy is now yellow. This is last week's map. Sardinia is now orange, and Val d'Aosta sadly has gone back to red, but the rest of the country is mostly yellow or orange. And for those in the yellow regions, we can travel freely to other yellow regions, which is a big change and something that I certainly intend to make the most of after feeling a wee bit cooped up here over the last wee while. But there's plenty happening in Rome. It's still been lovely to be here over the last few months. I'm enjoying the fact that now my wee plants on the balcony are bursting into life, and I've been getting out on my bike as usual all over Rome, and just wanted to share with you, and I'm just going to move these if I can. I only learned to do this yesterday, so forgive me if I'm a bit slow. There we go. Yes, out and about on the bike, I came across some unusual plant life. These are trees in the Borghese Park, not normally looking like this, but sporting some unusual knitwear, an art installation that was set up, I think back in January or February, and has continued into spring, and rather lovely. And up here, this is the park closest to me, the Piazza Vittorio Emanuelli Gardens. Here is a ceramic tree, which has been created by local school children over the last 6 months as part of a community project that they were able to work together on during the pandemic. And I think it's beautiful, not just because it adds colour and life to the area, but also because it is called the Tree of Identities, l'albero delle identità. And every child has been invited either to write their name or a feeling that they have on a ceramic leaf. Something probably that we're not always best at doing is expressing how we're feeling about things. And it's so important to do that when things are tough. And so although the galleries and museums have been shut, we have still been able to get out and about on walking tours. And this is a photograph from Eur, which is an area of Rome, which was designed in Mussolini's time, where I went on a walking tour a few weeks ago. And that is a building known as the Square Colosseum, which is now owned by Fendi. Italy is, I feel, very much open for business insofar as the measures allow. The overall feeling here is that life must go on and that we have to keep going, notwithstanding difficult circumstances. And so that is evident in what you see. The volunteer project that I'm involved in to feed the homeless at Termini Station and Ostiense Station is still going on, notwithstanding difficult circumstances. Obviously now we're all having to wear masks. It's a bit of a different experience not to be able to stand and chat to the people in the queue in the way that we used to, but they still have mouths to be fed, and that is work that is still important. And I think across the whole volunteering community there's been a feeling that we need to persist, even although it's hard. I wanted to share with you just a couple of photos that I took on the 25th of April, which is the Festa della Liberazione here. It's the anniversary of the date when Italy was liberated in World War II. But it's become not just a date when that liberation is remembered, but also a date to celebrate democracy and human rights in Italy. And people take it pretty seriously. So when I was out and about, I noticed that there were gatherings in parks and so on, most of them socially distanced, but not all. And here's a banner that I saw hanging there saying, Ieri partigiani, oggi antifascisti, which means yesterday we were partisans, today anti-fascists. And I like that. I like the idea that people are making the connection, the need for us to speak out today about the things that matter. The things may be slightly different, we may have different terms for them, but it's still important to speak up. And that theme was reflected in a piece of graffiti that I saw that day here. It says, borders kill, frontiere uccidono, indifference is complicity. And I feel that that is a really important point for us to carry forward, because whilst of course it's we should all be concerned about the fact that people are spreading ideas that we don't like, it's maybe a bigger concern that so many people fail to speak out about these things. And a reminder to all of us that it's important that we speak up as well when we feel concerned or angry about something that's going on in society. And I guess that's a feeling that is carried into the work that is carried out here by the Mediterranean Hope team and by me. So here we go. Mediterranean Hope, as most of you know, is this project that was born and established by the Federation of Protestant Churches back in 2013. Began life on Lampedusa, but now is operating in Sicily, in Calabria, in Lebanon, in Rome, and very recently in Bosnia. And I'll tell you a bit more about that new project once I have given you a bit of an update on the others. So just as a quick reminder, these are the different streams of work that we're involved in, and I'll talk to you about these in a little more detail as we go on. So beginning with the work on Lampedusa, where we have a small team, 4 people, some of whom have been based there for 8 years now. You can't really talk about Lampedusa without considering the overall context of arrivals in Italy, the numbers of people who are crossing the sea. And I wanted to show you two graphs. This one over here on the left shows you the difference in the numbers arriving over the first quarter of each of the last 3 years. And you can see from that that there appears to have been a very significant rise in the numbers over that first quarter. But it's important to see that in the context of the bigger picture for the last 5 years. So if you look at 2016, when numbers were at their peak, when things were really overwhelming, and we had over 180,000 people arriving in Italy, there has been something of a collapse really in the figures, a very sharp drop in the 3 years since that time. And this lowest figure corresponds with the time when Matteo Salvini was Minister of the Interior and the ports of Italy were said to be closed. So although the numbers are rising again, it has to be seen in the context of this unusual drop and that enormous peak. The numbers are increasing, people are still coming, but perhaps in numbers that we might more or less expect at this point. As well as talking to you about the numbers coming, I feel it's important to talk a bit about death as well and pushbacks, because it's a sad fact that just as the numbers of people crossing are increasing, so too are the numbers of people dying at sea. And in that context, it's important to talk about Libya. Libya was, as most of you I'm sure will know, a colony of Italy back in the day. And Italy continues to have an unusual relationship with Libya, I would say. It's also the case that Libya is doing Italy and the EU's dirty work in terms of intercepting migrant boats. It is being paid vast sums of money by the EU, who are not just providing money, but also what's called capacity building for the people that make up the Libyan Coast Guard. And they are doing effective work in intercepting boats. There are many, many people being returned to Libya, and sad to say, many, many people just not being picked up at all, and therefore drowning at sea. And there are examples of that all the time. As recently as last week, 130 people were left to drown at sea after 2 days of alarm calls and messages from people desperate for help. On Sunday, 95 people were pushed back by the Libyan Coast Guard to Libya. And of course, some people would say, well, that makes sense. Just look at where Libya is in comparison with the southern borders of the EU. But the thing is, the arrangement exists without any kind of conditioning on upholding human rights. And what we know is that when people are pushed back to Libya, they are put into conditions which are horrendous. Many people are detained in detention centres or exploited. Many of them are subjected to abuses and to violations. And I think we need to call that out and think about the morality of putting this responsibility for borders in the hands of a country which doesn't really have a fully formed government, which isn't concerned with safeguarding people's human rights. And it's going to keep happening. As recently as last month, Mario Draghi, who's the new Prime Minister, met with this chap, who is the new Prime Minister of Libya, to thank them for the work that they are doing in the Mediterranean Sea. And the EU is continuing that policy of externalising the borders, focusing on keeping people out rather than anything else. And of course, that's a theme that will be familiar to all of you, because that idea of just focusing on keeping people out is now becoming predominant in the UK as well. So in that sombre context, the team on Lampedusa are continuing to carry out their work of welcoming those who do make it across the sea, albeit that the conditions are more restrictive. They can't spend time talking to people in the way that they did, but can still hand out cups of tea and water and give a warm smile. The team are still reporting on what's going on, still reporting numbers and statistics and sharing that information with the NGOs that are involved in patrolling the Mediterranean Sea. And the team is also involved in, I guess, what we call curating memory, gathering information and stories about the people who come. They're involved in work to look after and maintain the local cemetery. And in initiatives like this one, the Coberta de Yusuf, or Joseph's Blanket, which has been created in memory of a baby who died at sea. And in terms of which people are invited to knit a square in memory, not just of Yusuf, but all of the children and adults who die at sea. It's a visible reminder that these are living or were living, breathing humans who have lost their lives in the hope of a better life. So moving on to the team in Lebanon, in terms of humanitarian corridors and the programme to bring people from Lebanon to Italy, I'm pleased to say that after what has been really a year of suspension, the corridors are going to start opening up again, and we are about to sign the third protocol with the Italian government, which will enable us to bring another 1,000 people into Italy, not just from Lebanon, but also now from Ethiopia as well. So opening up a pathway for a different group of people. Up until now, it's mostly been Syrian refugees with some Palestinians and people from other countries. And now there will be people from sub-Saharan Africa, from Eritrea and so on coming as well. And that's really exciting news. And actually, notwithstanding the strange relationship between Italy and Libya and the focus on externalising the borders, this new administration headed by Mario Draghi is proving to be very supportive of the Humanitarian Corridors project. So at least behind the scenes, that support is there, and we're glad of that. The team in Beirut has continued to, I guess, direct its attention to other community building projects whilst it's been impossible for it to carry out the work that it's normally doing for the Humanitarian Corridors project. The Nation Station project, which was begun in collaboration with other NGOs on the ground after the explosions in a disused petrol station, is thriving, and they are using that as a base to hand out food, medicines, healthcare information, and generally support people who've been affected by the explosions. The Medical Hope project, which has been on the go now for many years in Beirut, is also thriving. And down there on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see Luciano Griso, who's the doctor who heads that team. They are still treating people in the refugee camps in Beirut and still identifying people who can't be treated there and may need to be airlifted to Italy for specialist treatment that can't be offered. In Rome, the coordination and advocacy work continues, and of course that is my bag. There's been a very busy period of writing bids and applications for funding for various exciting and interesting projects that people are dreaming up, as is the way with Mediterranean Hope. And I've been very closely involved in developing an application for a huge amount of funding from the EU for a project to expand the humanitarian corridors and other legal pathways into a network out of North Africa into Europe. And we will find out in the summer whether or not that project has been successful. What's been interesting for me in the last few months has been the advocacy side of things, because at the end of the autumn, the new Pact on Migration and Asylum was published by the EU Commission, and it will overhaul EU migration policy in the years to come. And this woman here in the middle, Ylva Johansson, who is the commissioner with responsibility for promoting the Pact, has been diligent in, I suppose, setting out a new narrative in relation to migration in the EU. A much more positive narrative is coming out of the Commission than has been the case for a long time. That said, there's a lot about the Pact that we don't like: the huge focus on keeping people out, on returning people to the places that they've fled from. The glimmer of hope is that there is, as well as that, the intention, a clear intention to create and to enlarge the legal pathways for entering Europe. And that to me makes sense. If you are going to be firm about sending people back or deciding that people can't come in, you equally have to offer ways that do enable people to come safely and legally and to be able to contribute to society. And that's where we as an organisation have something to offer in terms of the conversation and the consultation that's happening about those programmes, because we have our own one to talk about and have built up some experience and some good practice that people are interested in hearing about. There are good things to share and things to say. So that's been part of my work over the last 3 months, that and also dialogue with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, because the UN is also trying to promote the expansion of places for admission for people across the world. Last time we met, if you were there, I talked quite a lot about the work that we're doing in Calabria for seasonal workers and the exploitation projects. And they're going on. The Etica Oranges project has done well this season and is helping to fund other projects. You might remember last time I talked to you about Light on Rosarno, which was the project well, I guess it's a road safety project at one level to help migrants who often are involved in road accidents light their bikes, wear high-vis jackets, and so on and so forth. There's a kind of satellite project now developed from that called Fuori dal Buio, which means out of the darkness. And what we've done is to employ a little team of tailors in Camini, which is the village that neighbours Rosarno, where the Light on Rosarno project takes place. And they are recycling old jackets. They are sewing reflective strips into those jackets, and the jackets are being handed on to the seasonal workers so that they can get the benefit of them, not just for warmth in the winter months, but also for the lighting and the strips as they cycle to and from. And we like that project because it is benefiting not just the seasonal workers, but also this group of people who were previously unemployed, as well as recycling clothes. So, you know, it's a typical kind of Mediterranean Hope project. In Sicily, the Casa delle Culture, the reception centre, is continuing to support several families who have been hosted there throughout the period of the pandemic. And as the humanitarian corridors restart, we expect to be hosting more fairly soon. The Casa delle Culture is also a community hub, as you know, and it's really lovely that some of the projects that had to close down during the lockdown period are restarting, albeit that some of them are outdoors. So, for example, after school club for the children, language learning, that type of thing. And it's a real feature of the work in Chicli that the local organisations are all working together and have signed a new solidarity pact whereby they are going to cooperate in initiatives, not just for migrants, but also for vulnerable people in the local community. The Casa delle Culture is based here in Chicli, in Ragusa, but the team are also now starting to do a little bit of work in the neighbouring region of Siracusa, and in particular in this place, which is a tiny hamlet called Casibile. It's not far from Syracuse itself. And it's a place where a lot of seasonal workers who are harvesting different kinds of produce have set up informal settlements, the same kind of dreadful conditions that I showed you in Rosarno last time round. So based on that experience in Rosarno, the team in Chicli are now starting to offer a similar level of support to the workers in Casibile. And at the moment, it's quite low key, but the aim, and this is one of the projects that's in development, is to open a hostel in Casibile, which will be able to host some of these seasonal workers in conditions which are much more suitable for people. And we'll also provide them with support and information about their rights and so on and so forth. And so on to Bosnia and the new project that is beginning to take life there. If you're not sure exactly where Bosnia is or where it is in relation to Italy, the map will maybe help. It's just across the Adriatic Sea from Italy. And I thought it would be helpful to show you that these Balkan countries, all in white, none of them are EU member states. And it's important to highlight that because they are surrounded by countries which are. And that then places pressure on their borders because lots of people are trying to get up here somewhere. So there's a particular pressure on the northwestern borders, and it's for that reason that at the moment a couple of Mediterranean Hope staff have been sent out to Bihać, which is just there on the border with Croatia. Bosnia has seen a huge number of migrants transiting through it in the last 3 years, an estimated 65,000 people, and around 10,000 are estimated to have been trapped in Bosnia in the last year or so. The Croatian border guards are known to be absolutely ruthless in pushing back those who attempt to cross the border into Croatia. So we understand that those who are there engage in what they call the game, which is the attempt to, using the woods as cover or the mountains as a means to cross the border to get from one country to another. And very few are successful. The forests are being stripped of trees, and the authorities are using drones and heat sensors to detect migrants. But even if that weren't the case, the behaviour of the border guards is enough, you would have thought, to deter anyone. There are consistent reports of human rights abuses, of violations, of degrading treatment, of people having their goods taken from them, of being stripped, of being sprayed with paint, you know, just things that range from humiliation to the worst of all things. And aside from that, there are the conditions, the climatic conditions in Bosnia. It's a place that you don't necessarily want to be in wintertime if you don't have the right clothes and you don't have the right footwear, and if you don't have accommodation. And the unfortunate reality is that there are about 6,000 refugees registered in camps in Bosnia, but about another 4,000 who are thought to be living in the woods, or if they're lucky, in an abandoned farmhouse. And of course, they have no amenities, they have no facilities at all. And so the staff who've gone out there are currently collaborating with a Catholic organisation called Piazza, which has been based on the ground there for some time. And they have, in the last couple of months, constructed some kitchens, some communal kitchens, where migrants can come, either bringing their own food or using ingredients that are supplied to them, and cook their own food, have a bit of social space, a bit of an opportunity to gather and to have some dignity restored, to be human again. The real point of our team being there has not just been to collaborate with IPSIA on this project, worthwhile though it is. It's there to, or they're there to enable them to see what's on the ground for themselves and to identify how we could be more useful as an organisation. And the first thing that we will have to do, we know now, is to register an office in Bosnia, because the Bosnian authorities are fairly ruthless about humanitarian aid. They basically don't want it. And they will criminalise humanitarian aid organisations that aren't properly registered, and they regularly stamp out outreach initiatives. So we need to get our ducks in a row if we want to have any hope of doing anything. And what I think the team has identified is that Bosnia is a complicated place, a bit like the communities in Chicli or in Lampedusa, welcoming on the one hand, but on the other hand, quite overwhelmed by the numbers that are coming. And remember that Bosnia is a place that's still suffering economically from the war back in the 1990s. So people are edgy about the people who are arriving. And therefore, any initiative that we undertake, we perceive has to help the local community as well. So at this stage, the thinking is that we will support organisations that are already there, that are supporting vulnerable people in the local community. What we would like to do is to open a day centre with facilities for showering, for laundry, social space, again, not just for migrants, but for the local community, for vulnerable people to use as well. We would also like, we think, to support the BHAT's Red Cross with a mobile outreach unit, which is going to some of these informal settlements with food supplies, clothes and the like, so that we can provide some direct support. And we would also like to get involved in some social inclusion and integration initiatives to offer some cultural activities, sport activities that will help the local community and the migrants to come together and get to know one another. Because if we've learned nothing else, it's that encounter helps people to well, it helps to break down barriers, it helps to overcome fear. At the moment, all of this is in the planning, and excitingly, it looks as though we're going to have significant funding from some of the Dutch churches to help us with this project, but we have to get everything fine-tuned. So I just wanted to share that with you at this stage so that you're up to date about what's keeping us going, what we might be doing in the future. And I think I should stop now and make sure that you've got a bit of time to ask questions and speak. Thanks very much.